Hello, Wazobia Code developers. Welcome back to Wazobia Code. The last video introduced you to React components and props. This video will introduce you to React state management with UseState. So first, what is a state in React? A state is a special kind of variable that we want our React component to remember and keep track of. Let us say you make an application that shows the number of times a user clicks a button. You want this remembered and tracked by your React website. And if the value changes, that is when the user clicks a button, you want React to re-render the page and show the new value for the number of times that the button has been clicked. This is the power of a state. Okay, so then what is useState? UseState is a special function that allows you to add state functionality to your React components. So with useState, you are basically telling your website, hey, website, when this variable changes, I want you to re-render my component. Let us dive right into a code example to show you how you can use state to do state management in your React applications. Okay, so we are back on Replit, and since we are working on React today, we are going to need to open a React REPL. I am going to open the React REPL that we made for the previous video where we played around with JSX syntax. So this is it, Wazobia Code React Practice. I would advise you to open it as well. At the end of this video, we're going to use the knowledge we've learned about states and use states to update our recipe sharing app. But then for now, to just learn about states and use state, let's just use our Wazobia Code React Practice REPL. Open a new tab. Okay, it's loaded and we run. We wait for the page to run. It's taking a while. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it's done loading and this is our app.jxx file. So we're going to create a new component and we're going to call this component button clicker component. We're going to use that to create our button clicker application. So create a new component, button clicker, yes, it's capitalized. Okay, good. And you know the syntax. Export default function. Export default function button clicker. Okay, and then return div h1 for now button clicker. Okay, so what you're going to realize is that this isn't being shown here, and we already know the answer for that. We know why this isn't happening because this component isn't in the app.jsx. So we're going to go to the app.jsx and we're going to import that component. So import button clicker from button clicker. And then where do we want to? Let's display it at the bottom. So that's going to be the last thing on our page. So button clicker. Yeah. And then here we have it. We have button clicker over here. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back into button clicker and we're actually going to start writing the code for the button clicker functionality that we're looking for. Well, like I said, in the button clicker, we want to have a button that we can click. And we also want to have a count showing us how many times we have clicked that button. So first thing we do is that we create a variable for the count. Right now, let's make it just an ordinary React variable. So let count equals to 0. Okay, we're not using state right now. It's just an ordinary JavaScript variable. And then we want to have a p tag. P, you have clicked the button. And then on that p tag, and in here, obviously, we want it to be count. So count. Curly brackets, remember, because it's a variable. You have clicked the button count. Okay, so we're going to remove this console over here. It's blocking our view. Okay, there you go. So you have clicked the button 0 and then times. Okay, you have clicked the button 0 times. And then the next thing we want to do is that we want to have a button. And when that button is clicked, we want to increase the value of count. Yeah. So how we can do that is we make a button. This is JavaScript syntax. Button on click bracket count plus plus plus. So when you click this button, count is going to increase. Yes, that's true. That's what this does. This says when you click the button, increase count by 1. So let me break down this line A for you a bit better. Let me increase the size of the screen so that we could, okay, and then do this as well. Okay, good. So this is saying that when you click this button, increase count by 1. That's what plus plus means in most programming languages and JavaScript. When you have a number variable, so you have a number variable here, count equals to 0. When you do count plus plus, it's the same thing as saying count is equals to count plus 1. But obviously, this is way longer. And then a shorter way to do it, a shorthand, is just doing count plus plus. If you did count minus minus, that's the same thing as saying count is equals to count minus 1. So we're saying that when you click the button, our function, increase the count by 1. So what do you expect to happen? Do you think that when I click this button right now, count is going to increase by 1? And if count is going to increase by 1, do you think it's going to get rendered over here in the page? Let us see. Hmm. We're clicking the button, but count isn't being increased by 1. It's still 0. Hmm. Let's try something else. Let's make a function and call it increment count. Function increment count. Okay. And then what do we want to do here? Let's do count plus equals to 1. And then not just that, after we increase count by 1, let's also console.log count. So we're going to log count to the console. So now here on click, when the button is clicked, we want to call our function. And remember, how do you call functions? Curly brackets and increment count. So now when the button is clicked, we're going to call the increment count function. Still the same thing. The page isn't being re-rendered. But this is something interesting that I want you to see. Okay, so we've made the function, and now after we increment the count, we increase the count by 1, and then we also log the value of the count to the console. So let's look at that in the console. Let's do this, DevTools, console. You can see a couple numbers being logged here, but let's make this view better. Okay, good. So this is a better way to look at it. Notice what is going to happen. When I click, this is the end. I click, 23 is logged. I click, 24. I click, 25. So what essentially is happening is that as we're clicking, we are increasing count. If you notice, count was 0. The first time I clicked, it went to 1, it went to 2, it went to 3, it went to 4, it went to 5, and it keeps going to 25. Count has been logged, but it's not being displayed. The component isn't being re-rendered every time count is changed. And that is where we can use state and UseState to add the functionality that when count changes, so when we click the button and count changes, we want the page to be re-rendered to show the new value of count. So I'm going to remove the console because it's blocking the other part of the page. So now how do we use UseState? Well, let's ask ourselves the question first. I mentioned that UseState is a function. Did we create the function? And no, we didn't create a function. It's a special function that we did not create. So we need to import it from somewhere. Where do we import UseState from? We import this from React. So the first thing you have to do when you want to use the useState function is import it from React. So how you would do that is import, then you need this curly bracket, use state from React. So we've imported useState. Now we need to use it. So how do you use useState? So here we had let count equals to 0. If we were going to use useState, what we would do is const. We're going to delete this. It's definitely going to cause an error, but then we'll fix it later. Const, we open our square brackets. Count, set count equals to use state 0. Okay, so let me explain this. So we are using use state, and then the variable that we want to store, the name of the state we want to store is count. What is set count? Well, we are going to need a way to change count. So how we've been changing count before is count plus equals to 1. Simple variable assignment. But then when you're using a state, you define the name of the state and then you define the name of the function that you're going to use to change the state. So count is the name of the state. Set count is going to be the function we're going to use to change the count state, the count variable. And then we have equals to use state. And then this value here is the beginning, the start of the value. So this is basically saying my state is count. The function I want to use when changing state is set count. When changing count is set count, and the initial value for count should be 0. So that's exactly what this line is saying. It's saying I want to create a state called the state count. Whenever I want to change the value of my state count, I want to do that using the function set count. And then the initial value of my state count should be 0. That is what this is doing. So let me delete this. Good. So remember how I said that whenever we want to change the value of count, we need to use the set count function. That is why we have set count inside here. So now we have count plus equals to 1, but we want to change the value of count. How do we change the value of count? We use the set count function, the function we created. And I want you to know that this could be anything really. It doesn't have to be set count. It is convention that it should be set and then the name of the state. So because our state is count, convention it should be set count. If our state was house, it should be set house. But then you could name it whatever you want to name it. We just do set count. And in here, we put the new value we want count to be. What is the new value we want count to be? We want count to become count plus 1. Close our brackets. Now, remember, when we did this before, we just count. We didn't have it as a state. When we clicked on the button, nothing happened. But now that we have count as a state, what happens when we click the button? Well, let's find out. Look, it's changing. So that is the power of states. States allow your page to get re-rendered whenever a variable changes. And that allows you to have a page that can dynamically change whenever some certain states that you define are modified. Okay, so now we've learnt about states. It's amazing. Let us use what we've learnt about states to improve our recipe sharing application. So we come back over to Replit. We open our recipe sharing application. We get into recipe details. So what exactly do we want to be states here? Well, we want our recipe name, recipe description, recipe ingredients, and recipe steps to be states. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the first step is we need to import use state from React. So import use state from React. Okay, so we've imported useState. Now we can use useState. And remember, how do you use useState? Well, remember, we have our square brackets. So recipe name, Yes, that's the name of the state. And the name of the function you use to change the state. Set recipe name. Okay. And then we use state. And then remember, inside it, we want our initial value to be inside it. In our case here, the initial value is going to be cake. Let us run our application and look at it. Okay, so we're good. So now we do the same thing here. Recipe description, set recipe description, and then use state a delicious cake. Okay, now we do it for lines 8 and 9. Let me increase this so we have a better view. Yeah, I think this is good. We're not going to mess with the file explorer. So now we have to do it for ingredients. Okay, so this is going to be a bit complicated. Not really complicated, but it's going to be a bit hard on the eyes. So pay attention. Set recipe ingredients. Okay, equals to, so like before, use state. And then what do we want the initial value of our recipe ingredients to be? We want the initial value of recipe ingredients to be this entire list. How do you do that? It's very easy. I kind of cheated because I already had the entire list there. But then all you need to do is just put the brackets and then put the list inside. For strings, all you need to do is just put the entire string. If it was a number, all you need to do is just put the number. Just put it inside the brackets and it becomes the initial value. So back over here, recipe steps, set recipe steps equals to, and then we want use state bracket close it, and I forgot to do this. Okay, so there it is. So if you look at the page, nothing changed. It looks the exact same as how we had it before. But then what we've essentially done is that now, if we ever had any buttons or anything inside our page that could change the recipe name, recipe description, or recipe ingredients, now that we have them set as states, when we interact with that thing that changes any of these states, our page will get re-rendered, and then we'll be able to see it on the page. Let me show you an example of this change. So let's say that we made a button on click. Let's say that after we click the button, we want to change the recipe name, not pizza, we don't eat that here, to jollof rice. Okay, and then we go here, we close button, and then change the food name. Change the food name. And then watch this. Jollof rice. And that happens because we've used state. I know that the syntax we've used for handling button clicks, so this on click, is a bit foreign to you if you don't have good fundamentals on JavaScript. So in the next lesson, we're going to explore how you can handle event changes in React. We're going to explore the different ways that can be done. That's all the content we have for today. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you understood the concept explained in this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Stay tuned to learn how to code with Wazobia Code.